This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Highball Graphics. For over 25 years, Highball Graphics has been providing high-quality decals for railroads in New England, Canada, and beyond. With over 2,000 sets in scales N through G, Highball Graphics has you and your project covered. Highball Graphics specializes in custom decal orders, serving freelance railroads worldwide. Check out their easy-to-use website at highballgraphics.com or email them at info@highballgraphics.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. On today's show, we get the opportunity to talk to the executive director of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, Michelle Kempema. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. We last time you were here, we were talking about the Rocky Mountain Train Show. And,
that's right.
You were real excited to go about it. So let's not waste any more time. Tell us, how was the Rocky Mountain Train Show?
It was so incredible. And I was so busy. I never got to see the whole entire show.
Wow.
But it was so fun. I think all I can think about are just how much fun we had there. Mini Prince was there. People got scanned. I got scanned.
Sure did.
All kinds of stuff. UMP Steam was there. Ed Dickens brought in some parts to the big boy, and that was really cool to see all of that. And the vendors are great, and I got to see all my friends, and the manufacturers were there. And yeah, it was just fun. We had our manufacturers open house at the museum. Usually what I do is on the Friday night after everybody's booths are set up, I'll host some sort of gathering for all the manufacturers that come to the show. And I make them drive to Greely every other year. And then I'll plan something in Denver every other year so they don't have to drive that hour. Yeah. I'll pick another museum. We did the Forney Museum last time, and then I might see if we could do the Colorado Railroad Museum this time because they have an indoor building now. So I don't know. I'll set up something fun for them this next year. But yeah, it's fun because we get to know them and they get to just be people.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they go to shows and everybody's like, oh my God, you're from such and such, whatever. But It's fun when they just get to run a train on the layout at the museum like anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing. It's like a quasi celebrity status they get, right? Like you talk about the Shane Wilsons and the Jim Wiggins and on and on of the world, but really they're just model railroaders just like us. It's been a lot of fun for me to find that out on the podcast, and it's certainly fun, like you said, to be able to treat them just like anybody else and be able to have their time to enjoy.
And I think that's true. Like they're modelers just like the rest of us. You know, it's funny. And even like the Union Pacific Steam Crew, those guys are modelers just like the rest of us. They just work in the 1-to-1 scale during the day. Yeah.
Which is always an interesting concept, isn't it? Like, you know, I have a full-time job where I can't imagine doing it as a hobby at night and on weekends, but you know, it's neat. It's a different aspect. I guess it's a deeper love, but very cool. And it seems like you're already excited for next year's Rocky Mountain Train Show.
Oh yeah. And there's one in between. We have a kind of a more local one that happens on Thanksgiving weekend, and it's actually close to Greely. It's up here in northern Colorado region. Yeah. And I feel like that one's just like a small family gathering, you know, like it's fun.
That's like the pre-Thanksgiving kind of family gathering.
It's just part of the holidays for us, actually. It's kind of the kickoff to the holidays because it's after Thanksgiving and it's right at the beginning of Christmas. So we play Christmas music at the train show, and I like that. So...
Yeah, that's fantastic. And having a train show just before Christmas is always, to me, a great idea anyway, because, you know, I'm always polishing my Christmas list, and it's good to go to a show and kind of get some ideas to throw on it, right?
You know, when we see the public at Christmas, it's because Christmas and trains are synonymous. They just go together.
Right.
It's the one time of year that probably the most of people in the general public actually pull out a train and put it under their tree, right?
Yeah.
Or in their Christmas village or whatever. It's when America models.
Yeah. Well, in hearing so many stories, not only that, but it's a lot of the times it's when, as a kid, they got their first train. So it's kind of like the anniversary of when they got started. So
it is. Christmas is such a big piece of trains.
Yeah, for sure. So that's great. And amongst a multitude of different events that you participate in and are going to be a part of, so you keep yourself very busy there. We'll get into all of those activities a bit later, but I want to start kind of in the beginning, like we like to try to do, and I'll ask you the question: what brought you into the model railroading hobby?
Okay, so I have two separate stories.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so if we go way back in time to 1991,
Okay.
I'm a college student.
Yeah.
And I'm studying engineering at CSU, and I meet an engineer, and he's super cute, and he's blonde, and we end up getting married, and we have this little tiny trailer, and I put him through graduate school. And during that whole time of college, we have a model train set. He was an N scaler. So we had this little tiny 4x8 sheet of plywood in the extra bedroom of our trailer home.
Okay. Yeah.
But I remember going to Caboose Hobbies in Denver. And for those that have been there, they'll understand this. And going down the N scale aisle of so many choices. And I picked out my first locomotive, and it was a Great Northern steam locomotive in that beautiful teal color. Mm-hmm. And I picked it for its color. And every single car that I picked to go behind it, which I'm sure were absolutely stupid and nowhere near prototypical, I picked them for their color. Yeah, sure. And so I have no idea what my train, I do not remember what I bought, but I was like, oh, here's a yellow car and a blue car and a red car and a green one. And these would look good together. And I totally bought an entire in-scale train at Caboose Hobbies based on its color.
It's a start though. You have an interest, right? Yeah, it's
and I think about that now, and I'm almost like rivet counter about some things, and I'm like, oh my God, my first train was all about the color.
Yeah.
So, and then with the story of how I got to the museum and really into modeling. So again, I was married for 14 years and I ended up divorcing. And so I moved back to Greely where my parents were because I had two daughters and they're in school and I'm working part-time. I'm going to college full-time because I didn't get my degree. I quit and put him through graduate school. Okay. And so I'm working at this homeless shelter part-time and they get a call from this guy named David Trussell, and he's got some fundraiser he wants to do for the homeless shelter I work for. And they said, Michelle, you've got kids, go do this thing. And they handed me a piece of paper that said Greely Freight Station. Okay. And so on this Saturday, this is 2009, I show up with my daughter, Anna, my younger one. She wanted to go. And we go to this big green metal building and we walk in and there's a card table and we've invited our donors at the shelter to come. Mm-hmm. to this event and they each pay $5. So we're going to raise some money for the homeless shelter. And so we go into this world and we walked in like, oh my God, this is amazing. And Anna was 7 and she goes off into the middle of the layout. I'm sitting at the little card table with the cash box. And a couple hours later, she comes back and she says, Mom, this is the coolest place I've ever been. Could we volunteer here?
That's awesome.
And I said, this is really, really cool. Let's do that. And so 2 Saturdays a month from 2009 and 10, we volunteered to man the little gift shop, the little shop that could. Mm-hmm. And Anna would read in the caboose to kids and she would do all sorts of things. Anna put in 200 volunteer hours during that time.
Wow.
And I don't remember how many I put in because then I ended up staying. But so I graduated. Is the
meter still running a little bit from that time?
So I graduated college in the spring of 2010. And that summer, Dave said to me, I was still working at the homeless shelter. He says, I think this place could be something, Michelle. He said, I built it to play on it. I built it because I was compelled to build it. Yeah. And he said, I think it could be sustainable. I never dreamed that. I just thought I would die and give it to the city of Greely. Yeah. And he said, I'll make you a deal. And you'd have to know Dave. He'd cross his arms and he'd say, let's make a deal on this. He said, if you promise to stay for 3 years, I promise to pay you for 3 years. And I said, okay. So we shook on it. Yep. And on the 3rd year, we put money in the bank at the end of our budget year.
Wow.
And I remember our first budget was $80,000 that year, which is tiny. Yeah. And now we have a much larger budget and a staff of 6 people. Wow. And I've been there for 12, going on 13 years. I started employment on January 3rd or something, whatever the first weekday was of 2011. Wow. So I've been there a while.
That's incredible. I mean, to go from, volunteering and, getting to learn this, to bringing it to what it is now. I mean, there's so many people that know the Colorado Model Railroad Museum when you mention it wherever. You've done such a phenomenal job of you and your team of getting the word out about it. And
well, thank you.
Yeah,
it's because we're having fun and we just share that with people.
Oh, that's definitely a key part. You're having fun right from the beginning of signing on tonight and beyond and beyond. We know that
we had to change our name. I don't know if many people know that story, why we changed our name.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would go to conventions like tourism. I worked in the tourism world first. I didn't know anything about the trains. I'm just getting people in the door.
Sure.
And my name tag said Greely Freight Station, but everybody read it as Freight Station. They're like, oh my God, you have a haunted house. How cool is that? Right? And so I would get that all the time. Our phone book for those first 3 years, actually for the first 6 years, I think, put us under freight forwarding with FedEx and UPS in the yellow pages.
So how many calls were you getting to ship packages?
Oh my God, so many. My favorite call of all time was, could you package and ship our trampoline for us? I'm like, no, I can't ship your trampoline.
Yeah, no.
It was so funny. So,
how big is the trampoline? What scale is it? Yeah.
Does it fold? Because we need to fold that up a little.
A little bit.
So we ended up talking about it, and the board at the time, we actually were getting visitors from around the country at this point because Model Railroader had published about the museum. So we were getting some modelers coming in to see us, and our community was finding us. And we realized that we're a little bit bigger than Greely. So we decided to think, we're going to think big. We're going to become the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, not just the Greely Museum.
That's right. Yeah.
But you know how the board decided the name? They did a ton of Google searches. What do people search for? They searched for Colorado and they searched for model train. We're not model trainers, model railroads. That's why it had to be the word railroad.
Yeah.
Right. And then a museum. So
you and I in the board, we're all on the same wavelength when it comes to how to name things. I'll tell a very quick story that I run a roller hockey league on the weekends, and we did the same thing. It was like when I took it over, it was like named Groton Inline Hockey League, but all the players were coming from all over this side of the state. So I was like, this is easy. Eastern Connecticut Roller Hockey League. That's it. And people search for
so simple, right?
So they type in Connecticut and roller hockey. They find that. So you guys are definitely on the same wavelength as me by renaming it to Colorado.
That's how we got our name.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more, because you mentioned Dave and his beginnings of this. Why don't you tell a little bit of the history of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum or the Greely Freight House and how that all started?
Yeah. So Dave Trussell was a modeler his whole life. Yeah. And when Dave was a little boy, his father was in World War II. And he lived with his grandparents, and his father was killed at the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, wow.
And so Dave grew up pretty much between his mother and his grandparents, riding trains back and forth in Missouri between grandma and his mom, and loved the railroad. And he was the little kid that the railroaders all just kind of raised him and would put him on the train. And so he loved that. And then he ended up going into the Army during Vietnam. So he went to Vietnam, and he was actually a reporter for the Army. That's what he did. He says all he did was injure I think it was one of his fingers. He's like, it's kind of sad, but he said, but I did keep the effort going and everything. He supported him by writing stories. So when he came back, his mother said, did you know I have a life insurance policy on your father when he died? And so she had $10,000 to give him. And so he bought a newspaper in Lakeview, Oregon called the Lake County Examiner. Wow. And so he ran this little newspaper there for like the first 10 years. And he got married in that time frame too to Miss Mickey. And she's lovely. I love his wife. She's the best. And so David and Mickey lived in Lakeview, Oregon, and they had their son Tim, and life was great. And Dave watched the railroad that came from Lakeview, Oregon every day, the Oregon, California, and Eastern. Mm-hmm. So he would see this town or he would see this railroad like all around him.
Yep.
And so he, at the same time, he had Lynn Westcott's book, 101 Track Plans. A lot of people have seen that book. It's been around a long time and republished many times, but they never changed. The next to the last article in the book says, if I had $1 million. That's the title of the article. Mm-hmm. And it talks about if you had $1 million, you could build the ultimate model railroad. And Dave took it as a challenge. So he started planning the ultimate model railroad because he loves scenery. He's not an operations guy. He's a scenery. He just loves the building, the land, and the views. So he designed many things, built many layouts over his life. He had a couple of different traveling layouts. He and his two stepsisters created Swift Communications, and they own 26 newspapers around the western part of the U.S., including Lake Tahoe and some stuff down in New Mexico and California, Carson City, a lot of those. And then Greely, Colorado, the Greely Tribune.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that's how Dave got to Greely. That's why we have an Oregon layout with Lakeview, Oregon on it.
Yep. I'm sure that's a big question that's asked. Yep.
Why? Well, the people that notice, the general public has no clue it's in Oregon. They don't pay attention. They just come in to see a beautiful miniature world with trains in it.
Sure.
So they want passenger trains and, diesel trains and steam trains, and that's all they want. And they don't care. The modelers come in and they notice right away, why is this Oregon and Colorado? And the people from Oregon recognize it because a lot of the town stuff is real. So we get people that are from Oregon sometimes who go, oh my God, I know this place.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's why we have what we have. What we have, I think, was drawing number 7 of 20 that he did for a layout. Mm-hmm. And so it was his life's passion. In fact, Dave is a spiritual man, and he had a little paper that he kept in his wallet that said, do I trust God who gave me the abilities to do what I need to do to make this happen? And then he had a Bible verse with it. And I have that little piece of paper in the office still. I kept it.
That's amazing.
So it was really neat. Dave funded it by buying and selling Lionel trains because he's actually an expert and collector of Lionel, and he built an HO scale world.
Wow.
So second question of why and what are you doing? Because he wanted realistic scenery, he built an HO scale layout.
Yeah. Although his love for Lionel trains, but yet he moved over.
But he collects Lionel, and in fact, his wife just gave him permission. So Dave is retired, does not live in Greeley anymore. All his grandkids are in Pennsylvania. Wow. So I think it was around 2010, 2011, 2012. In there, Dave started going, I'm missing my grandkids growing up. So Michelle, we got to make this place sustainable. That was kind of the point, was to make it so Dave could leave it.
Yeah. He did.
Right? He built it and then he donated it into the nonprofit. And now Dave is a volunteer. Wow. That's all. He's our founder and builder, but the IRS just sees him as a volunteer. Wow. So he did move to Pennsylvania. They live right outside of Strasburg, in Lancaster, because his son is a professor at the university there. Yeah. So on his wall, his wife, Mickey, finally said, okay, Dave, you can bring your Lionel trains home and put them up. So he just replaced our collection with a different collection because he wanted that one at his house in Pennsylvania. And so he's still buying and selling Lionel.
Well, that's something to keep him busy. And he's in a great railroading area too.
Oh, yeah. I love visiting them because I get to go ride trains and see the museums.
Yeah, for sure. But
so that, did I answer all your questions about Dave and why he built it?
I think you did. I mean, that's an amazing story. Something that he had a dream and he got that million. He built the layout.
He did.
So how did he get? I mean, he acquires this building, right? He built the building.
He had the land.
Right.
In fact, I'm a little frustrated with Dave right now.
Okay.
So Dave had a huge property. So the Greely Tribune owned the warehouse that's just south of the current museum.
Yep.
And then there was this dirt lot, and it was all one piece of property. Okay. Well, when Dave retired, he sold off his piece of the business to his sisters, and he divided that land in two.
Okay.
And so he built the museum on this piece of empty land, and then there's this warehouse that's not ours. And we needed to grow, and they had newsprint in it, and they needed it. And so... Yeah. And right now, so we acquired the warehouse later. A donor bought it for us when the Greely Tribune stopped printing their own paper and had it printed somewhere else.
Okay.
So we now have the warehouse. However, then I had to do a plat subdivision, put all the land back together. And now I got to move 2 power poles that Dave put up when he split the property.
Any of this you imagined when you became a volunteer, that you'd be doing all these kind of real estate kind of things? And
no, I had no idea how much trouble a power pole could be. It's been We were at the Amherst show, and the Iowa Skilled Engineering guys gave away Proto Throttle 1000,
Yep.
and they raised like $800. And they said, "What are you going to do with it?" And I said, "Move a power pole." And I know that doesn't sound fun, but we so need this. And I said, "You guys are electrical engineers, so I think this is appropriate."
Yeah, they got dreams of like, you got to do it to expand the layout, add scenery, buy locomotives, maybe put some other proto throttles, or no, we're moving a power pole. That's
well, if I don't move the power pole, we don't get a garden railroad.
That's right.
We don't get an in-scale layout, and we don't get a children's play area.
Yeah.
So it's super important for everything.
Yep.
But yeah, it doesn't sound sexy at all. It's just a power pole.
No, just surrounded by that. That's for sure. That's phenomenal. So let's talk about, we were saying that he, had the land, built the building, and then is this something that it's like a solo project up until the volunteerism?
No.
How does he get this big thing built?
Okay. So, and I need to tell you a little history. Right before he bought the land and put the building on it, he had a traveling layout. He moved to Greely in 1990-ish, somewhere in there, to be the editor of the Greely Tribune, and fell in love with Greely, Colorado, and decided that's where he would retire and build his layout. But in the meantime, he had a traveling layout called the Denver, Greely, and Tahoe. And he did take it to some things, and he took it to the National Train Show that was in Portland, Oregon, sometime in the late 90s. And he won the grand prize, and they said, "You're done. You can't compete anymore." And then he got bored. And that's how we got the museum.
Yeah, okay.
But his layout was in storage. When I first started there and everything, he had a storage unit with 2 big trailers with his traveling layout in it. Well, the Sherman Hill Model Railroad Club in Cheyenne decided to talk to him about purchasing it. So he sold it to him for $1.
Wow. How heck of a deal
so
there.
That layout, and they've changed a lot of it, but they've kept some of the really cool pieces of it, and it's on display in the mall in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So you can go see Dave's early work, some of it, and then you can come to the museum and see his later work. The reason I think that the museum was done on time, though, he started working on it in 2004 and then completed it in 2009. And the only way you're going to get 5,500 square feet done and operational in 5 years is you don't let anybody play.
Yeah.
So there was no operations of a plywood and Pacific. You could test things, but there was no playing till it was done. And that really motivated them. Because, a lot of modelers, you get some stuff done and then you start operating.
That'd be me. It's hard, I mean, in some ways, but yeah, if you really want to get it accomplished, you test it out, you make sure stuff works, and then you have to move on. Otherwise, you're
or like once a month, he'd let him run a train for fun, but there was no operating until it was done. And I think that's why it's complete.
Now you say he wasn't really an operations guy, but obviously with this layout there is. What kind of convinced to build this and with the capability of having operations?
I think talking with Dave over the years, his dream for what he built, he really didn't think the general public would like it. That's the number one thing. He thought that model railroad clubs would come and visit and operate.
Right.
So he planned it for wives. There is a nice ladies' bathroom. The gift shop came later. It was originally the tree building room or the storage room or something. And they built trees in my office too. And it was all an afterthought to make it public. He just thought that modelers would come and play on it. And so he knew that operations are important to people. And if he didn't put operations on it, nobody would come.
Yeah, that definitely keeps people interested. Yeah.
But what he had in mind really though, and it's weird because he says that to me, he says, I just thought modelers would come, but at the same time, he built something, he wanted it to be easily functional all the time. He didn't want something with constant repairs. Yeah. And he wanted over the road because I think he thought that families would love it, but I don't know how he didn't think it would be something bigger than it is, but so he did build it as an interface between the public and the modelers, really. So with the wide aisles. Oh, and he did go visit everywhere. Dave did this presentation one time that I loved, and he talked about visiting all the places of the world and the things he loved about it and didn't like about it. It was his takeaways from visiting San Diego and Northlands and Chicago and Miniature Wonderland and all these places and the things he learned from all that. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that's a true testament to what we say, even to those that aren't building something that's 5,500 square feet. It's like, if when you're building, go see a bunch of layouts. There's always a takeaway from any layout you go to see, whether positive or negative. Go out and see as many as possible before you really commit yourself to a track plan, and before you put the first screw in a board. Know what you really want, and use those layouts to find it.
And he did that. He did travel everywhere, and see everything he could possibly see. And there were places that he just loved, and things he loved. There were things he loved about every place he went, and then things he didn't like, which is why our plexiglass is only 6 inches high. He got really tired of yelling at people over plexiglass. So our plexiglass is really, really low.
Nice. You start volunteering after you see this, and your daughter definitely reels you in to help you with this idea. But prior to this, you talk about your experience kind of was with like an N scale layout and picking boxcars by color.
Yeah.
Where does that, you bring in, obviously it's clear to me you talked about the tourism industry, and you have a great mind, and for marketing and understanding how to turn this into more than just what Dave thought it was going to be. Where do you start on the model railroading side? Like, how does that education start to form?
Oh yeah, this is a good story. And it's like the end of 2016, early 2017, mid or somewhere in there. We're selling out over this caboose that Dave had. He had Athearn make a caboose before I came anywhere on board. Dave owned a caboose, so he ordered them. And so we had sold them in our gift shop, and we're running out. I think I called Athearn 17 times and left a message and said, I'd like to order 500 cabooses. And no one called me back. So, so I'm getting a little frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, hey guys, I saw this thing called the National Train Show, and it's going to be in Kansas City in 2018. And I'm going to go because Athearn's going to be there, and they have to talk to me if I'm standing in front of them.
Yeah.
And so I call up the National Train Show, and I'm like, I'm a museum. What's your nonprofit rate? And they're like, we've never had a museum come. So we worked it all out, and they were awesome to us, and we had a booth there. And I met the industry at the National Train Show in Kansas City in 2018. So the first thing I did, our booth wasn't even up, and I had that caboose in my hand, and the volunteers that were with me, they were dying laughing. They're like, we weren't there 5 seconds and she had that caboose in her hand. She's down at the Athearn booth. And so I walk into the Athearn booth, and there's Chris Palomares. And for those of you that know him, who I love now, by the way, he's a friend of mine now, but I walked up to him and I said, oh my gosh, I am so excited to meet you. I have this caboose and I need to order like 500 of these cabooses. And he goes, here's my card. We'll talk later. And I was just like, I'm going to punch
you. Here comes the downside to getting out and meeting the public at a train show, right? Here comes Michelle with a caboose in hand, and
we're going to talk about this. And he just kind of like turned and went on about his business, and I was just like so crushed. We talked about it later, totally, but it was so funny. I was just like, are you kidding me? Talk to me. Don't give me your business card.
Yeah.
It was funny. I did get my cabooses though.
Good. Hey,
so that was good. But I met the industry there. The industry. I'd never thought about who makes the stuff on the layout.
Right.
And how does it work? And so I'd spent all those years just making us a tourist attraction. I sat on so many boards. I was the president of our state's tourism board for 6 years. For Colorado. Yep. And I just stepped off that board this year, finally.
one less thing. I'm sure you'll backfill that time.
I love them, but I'll still go to that convention, but I'm not in charge anymore. It's awesome. Yeah. So, so then I guess I just started meeting the industry and asking questions. I've just been asking questions since 2018. And for those of you that have been around me, you'll know I'm always like, how does that work? What do you do? I don't get it. Tell me, please. Can I try that?
Yeah.
So that's been me since then. And I've learned so much. And I've actually learned a lot about operating in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I'd never really operated on anybody's layouts because I got asked that. I'm trying to think of who asked me that. And I said, nobody's ever invited me to their house.
What?
Yeah, it was like 2 years ago. It took until then for someone to actually invite me to their house to operate. And so I got the first home layout I ever operated on was in Texas.
Wow.
So
you had to go a long way.
And then my friends here were like, what are you talking about? We would have invited you. And I'm like, well, you didn't.
But you didn't. Yeah. And I had to travel all the way to Texas to go
operate on a home layout. Yeah. But now I've been operating on home layouts everywhere I go because thanks to Facebook, I get invited by people every time I say I'm going somewhere. And so that's been just wonderful. Modelers are wonderful and they invite me to everything.
Yeah, it is a great group of people who are willing to teach too. That's what's really neat. If you ask like you've done, you ask the questions, don't be afraid to ask. And you certainly don't seem to be any bit afraid to ask people questions. So
not at all.
Speak up. So no, that's fantastic.
If you have a stupid question, tell me, I'll ask it for you.
There you go.
No, there are no stupid questions.
There are no stupid questions. So tell me, let's talk about that first operating session. You said it was in Texas. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. That was a crazy whirlwind. So Speed Muller found out I was in Texas for a tourism convention. Yep. And I knew him through Facebook at AML podcasts and other things. And he says, you're coming to my house to operate. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so, that's not an invite. That's a demand, isn't it?
Which was wonderful. He is a great host, by the way. He's just great. So he lined up multiple operating sessions while I was there, but the first one was at his house. And he has, I don't know if you know much about Speed. He's a great person. He's from Namibia.
Okay.
And so his railroad is Namibian. And so it's the most interesting layout ever because it's all Africa. And the scenery is different and it's N scale. And I'd never done a home N scale layout other than my own piece of plywood years ago. Yep. It was fun. And he put me on an N scale hump yard. Like I ran a train and then I did. And I was terrified the whole time. I'm going to break something. Oh my God. Can I touch this? Are you sure? And he's just like, calm down, Michelle. Yeah. And so, it was fun. And he got me through that first one. I was kind of freaking out a little.
It's a very familiar story when anybody has that first time operating that, oh my God, and then you come over, especially when you talk about like that, when those kind of level of detail and has all been put on the layout and you're like, you don't want to touch it. Yeah. You're afraid to mess up and they're pretty intense and, it's definitely good to have somebody that's, can come and bring you in. Yeah.
The next night he took me to Eric's house. Eric Bumper has a beautiful, perfect layout in HO scale. Like everything on it is perfect. It's beautiful. And I was like, I can't touch this because I will break it. And he goes, it's okay. You can just be the engineer and I'll be the conductor. And honestly, I think that is how I got in comfortable with operations is I didn't have to be in charge right off the bat. Mm-hmm. He could just say, move the locomotive forward and move it back. And he was doing the cars and he was doing all the switch lists and all of that. And I just got to stand there and not totally panic.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
And that helped me a lot. And that really helped me so much to have and to see, because honestly, I didn't know what a switch list was. Mm-hmm. I'd never switched a car in my life. I don't know what we're doing. And so he's being kind and teaching me this the whole time, which was really nice. So, and so now I'm able to tell people, the first time you operate, don't be afraid to ask someone to go with you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So all this new operating, but you work in a museum that has an operating layout. Have you? When do you finally operate? Do you ever operate this one?
I can, not as much as I want to because I'm always busy. And every time I try to take a train out, somebody needs me and then I have to hand it off to somebody. I know how to run a train around our layout, but that doesn't mean I know how to operate a switch list.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, oh my God, Michelle, you must be such a great operator. And here I am. Oh, and don't forget, I have the pressure of being the director of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum. I should know what I'm doing. Yeah. I don't have a clue because our layout's different. Yeah. Our layout is so different than a home layout.
Right.
And so we have a massive amount it takes an hour to take a through train around the layout.
Wow.
It will take you an hour to get that train around the layout. You got to know 128 signals and it's different. And the dispatcher is controlling every signal for you.
Yeah.
So I know how to run and look at a signal. I do not know how to switch cars in multiple yards from a switch list.
Right.
We do have some of those jobs, but I'd never done them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a lot of pressure on me, a lot of self-imposed pressure, but I'm like, I can't suck. I run a museum for trades.
Yeah, but what you definitely don't suck at is, what the on the marketing side again, and promoting this and really an awesome ambassador of the hobby. And you necessarily don't need to know all that. You've built that entire support system that keeps this thing going.
And I think my journey of learning to model has really helped me explain it to the public, and understand it. And I understand the museum so much better. I'm so glad that I'm on this journey. And in fact, I have a tiny N scale layout again. Well, I have like a little 2x4 little layout over here in my room, so I can practice.
and a little bit more rivet counter, a little bit more picked.
Oh my gosh, yes, I'm super picky. I'm like, that's the wrong era, and that is not a car that ran on a consist with the big boy. I'm sorry. I'm such a stickler now. It's terrible, and in fact, it's inhibiting my modeling because I want it to be more perfect than I'm capable of doing.
I guess that's how you get there, right? By continuing to have your high standards and keep trying to go for them, right?
So I keep trying. I just keep learning. I built my first structure this last week. It's terrible, but it's complete and it stands. And so I'm like, win.
There you go.
So
that's how it gets done. I made the joke on a previous podcast. The title MMR is not on anybody's birth certificate. It's like you weren't born with it, right? It's something that just you developed over time and practice and patience and maybe some good guidance along the way too, that have helped them get to a point where they become, great model railroaders. Again, it doesn't happen overnight.
And I tell you, the MMR's achievement program is what will actually push me to continue to model, because I'm one of those people that's really challenged by those things, like in a good way, like I must complete. When I went through college in my 30s, when I went back to college, I had to get A's. I'm like, I must have a 4.0. And I was just challenged to I just push myself to do those things. And the AP program will push me to learn to model because I want the darn certificate on the wall.
Yeah, there you go. It'll look good in your
I'm
office.
Like, I'm that person. I must have that.
That's
but the point is to have the modeling journey on the way. That's the point, right?
Right.
I think a lot of people lose sight of that, and they think that the MMR is just something that, snobby people do. It's not. It's a journey. Mm-hmm. It's a journey to get there, to get you through a modeling journey and to do it, to learn it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people already know it before they started, but for some people it is a learning journey. I look at Cynthia Priest right now. Oh my gosh, she's totally doing it. She's knocking out her MMR by learning to do it.
Yeah. I listened to, we just recently talked to Bill Brown, who's out in the central New York area, and he's, talked about the achievement program, and it nails it exactly right. Whether it be you or Cynthia or him or anybody that's done the MMR or working on their MMR, it's what you put into it. It's not, you're doing it for, as you said, it's the journey and the effort you put in to become a better modeler, and that's the end result of it. So it's really neat to hear from you that, as somebody that's, I would call fairly new to the hobby still,
definitely still new to the hobby,
but still looking to grow and hone your skill set, which is really neat, and aim for that higher level.
Yeah, that's why I resurrected our NMRA. So I joined the NMRA, and I didn't get an email from anybody. And I was like, I'm all alone in the world. There's no other NMRA members in Colorado.
You're right. You're the president. You're the board.
I'm the only one. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, right.
And so I finally get a hold of Gordy, and I'm like, what's the deal? Am I the only NMRA member? And he's like, no, your division doesn't have a superintendent anymore. And I said, well, what does that mean? So I kind of researched all of that, and I became the superintendent of the Northern Colorado division of the NMRA last October. And our division is focused on the AP program, and all we do is get together and work. We have work sessions pretty much every week, and operating, so that we're going through the dispatcher one. Nice. And you know what? There's like 45 modelers in our division.
That's awesome.
Oh my God, they're out there. Only about 15 ever come to a meeting, but we're having fun.
There were 44 lost souls until Michelle emailed Gordy, and
they all got an email. Yeah. And I got an email back from one person who's like, please don't ever email me again. And I looked, and he's like a lifetime member of the NMRA. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be on every list they give me. I can't help it.
Yep. Yeah.
So it was funny.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So you've got yourself involved in the NMRA division that you've got the museum,
yeah.
and then all the activities within the museum. I was scrolling through the website and of course the Facebook page, and boy, oh boy, this is not just a museum where people come to just walk through and leave. There is so much going on.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And our youth programs are awesome right now.
Yeah, that's the one that stuck out to me. You right now, I mean, this will air right now. We're recording on the 11th of July. We'll air this in August. But right now, you've got the STEAM summer camp going. Why don't you tell us a bit about your STEAM? Because I know when I talked to you the last time, you were so passionate about the STEAM program. I want you to tell us a bit more about that in the summer camp.
And I have to start off by another story about the museum. Every time that we have a real need for something, someone comes through the door. I call it being blessed. I'm a little on the religious side, so I feel like we're just blessed, right?
Absolutely.
And if we continue to do the right thing, we will always be blessed. We always need to do the right thing. And sometimes that costs us money or whatever, but it's the right thing to do, and we do it. And so 2 years ago, I came into my office one day and there's a resume on my desk. And I'm like, what is that? Who comes in here and applies on their own, right? So we weren't really hiring, so I didn't think anything of it. Well, 2 weeks later, I'm down at the front desk and this girl walks in and she goes, hi, I'm Madison. I left my resume for you, but I don't think you got it, so I brought you another one. She said, I really want to work here. I'm going to college and I think this is the most amazing place I've ever been. And I looked at her and I said, you're hired.
Yeah. You don't let that. They don't get to leave if they're like that. They don't get to leave. Yeah.
I said, "Come and talk to me next week. I think we can work out something for you." So we gave her Sundays because the other girl was also in college and needed some Sundays off. So they job shared it while they're in college. They did that. Well, Madison graduated last December. She did a semester at sea in the fall, and then she graduated, and we hired her as our youth director.
Wow.
And so she's amazing. My office is so colorful. We all sit in the same office. And right now there's like pom-pom balls and colorful paper. And she's so fun. And so her summer camps are just fun. And she did her first one that first week of June. We've never had summer camps. And the only time you can do it is 8 to 10 a.m. because we open to the public at 10. And we don't have classrooms, right? We don't have anything but the lobby to work with.
Right.
So they have to be just 2 hours. Well, two of the little kids in the first one had so much fun. They signed up again for the end of July. They're coming back.
Awesome. That's awesome.
But it's fun. So this week that we're recording is her first week doing like middle school kids. Mm-hmm. And it's been fun because it's different. It's all about like science and stuff. And so it's been fun to watch Madison, and she's just a blessing. I ran our youth programs during COVID, and we did STEAM Kids Virtual Classroom. And oh man, was that a ton of work. Because I had to create curriculum, and then I had to video it, teach the kids, get the kits built, get the kits to Boys and Girls Club to get to the 800 kids on the list. And that was a ton of work, but it was fun. But I was like, I'm so glad we have a youth director and I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just getting old.
I'm just still impressed. Somebody that walks in and just, that's so impressive. Yeah. They basically helped invent that job.
I invented my job and Madison has invented hers. And she keeps saying, are you okay if I do? And I'm like, Madison, I 100% support you. You do. You can try it. And I said, you can try it. And if you fail, you learned a lesson and we do it different next time.
That's right.
Right. And so it's been interesting for her because it's her first job, and so she's been super nervous about some things. And I'm like, if summer camps fail, then we do it different. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's okay.
Right.
So have fun and it'll be all right.
So talk about STEAM, because other than when we talk about STEAM and when we're model railroaders, what do we think? But there's another, it's an acronym. So why don't you tell us about STEAM as an acronym and what the goal and purpose is?
I didn't make it up. It's been out there quite a while, but it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We just add the A for art. So it's science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
Yeah. Right.
And STEAM, it's interesting. In 2018, we called a youth summit in Greely. And Walthers came, and a bunch of other people came from around the country, and like TSG Multimedia, they came, and a bunch of people that work with youth, and Blaine Holbrook, who has the pizza box layouts. And we got together and had a discussion about how do we make the hobby sustainable in youth programming. And at the time, the NMRA had said no, their policy, like through time, they were like, And so it's kind of a reaction to that, I think, that really pulled us together and really kicked us into motion.
Yeah.
And it was exciting that last year we got to look at the NMRA's new youth policy and we all approved it and thought it was great. So there you go.
Good to see involvement in that topic for sure.
Yeah. So, but the STEAM programming, when you look at model railroading, it has every aspect of STEM and STEAM programming. You've got electronics, you've got art, engineering, obviously, right? And science, technology all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
So Walthers they did some actual real studies. They hired an actual outside firm to conduct like studies in Milwaukee with families about the hobby in general. And their findings were that kids love it and parents think their kids don't love it or wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so we have to overcome that barrier. There's also the barrier of price and accessibility in this hobby. And so how do we overcome that? And so we've been working together for all these years on different programs. Walthers came out with Build a World, which is a great response to it. They'll probably adapt that into classroom modes, because if we don't get modeling back into schools, they don't know what they're missing.
Right. And there's a value to the tangibles, right? We could, right. You could do model railroading simulated, you could do it in different ways, but there's nothing like that, the tangible physical aspect of this. We
started coining a new phrase when we're talking about it in youth programming. We're building miniature worlds.
Right.
They don't necessarily have to have a train in it, but it's definitely a miniature world. And it is equally girls and boys involved in and interested.
Sure.
We did, I don't know if you know this, but I'm trying to think of what year, definitely pre-COVID, probably 2018. We taught in a public school every day for an entire semester. We spent an hour a day with kids building big woodland scenic kits.
Awesome.
And then at the end of the semester, we put them all together into a big layout and had a big thing with all the families. It was fun. And we did it with little kids, and we did it with all the way up to 8th graders. And that was a lot of work on my part. I'm like, oh, teachers, man, let me buy you some cookies. But it was really cool. And it was a great learning experience for us. We just jumped in with our School of Innovation that's down the street from us and did it. And the kids loved it.
Yeah.
And then they came back the next year and they built their own layout without us.
Wow.
Yeah, the school built their own layout, and they would come over and look at stuff, and we would give them a bunch of supplies, and they would go back and they built, and they did it on their own. The kids did. They planned their layout. They built it. It was so cool.
Yeah.
And then we did a Lego program with them, because we're like, what do you want to do next? Well, they wanted to do Lego programs. So I got a grant for $10,000 worth of Legos.
Yeah.
And we did Lego first. We did a competition, and we did this with boys and girls clubs.
Yeah.
And we competed in the space Lego competition, and they built trains on the moon, because, trains there'll be monorails on the moon.
Oh, nice.
The kids, they had amazing plans of how they would move people on the moon. It was amazing, because people are like, you're doing what? And we're like, don't worry, it's all good.
There's so much education that could be done through this hobby when you talk about, STEAM and, the things that it represents. There's another letter that doesn't fit in there, but I always felt that as another big piece is history, because it's such a big piece of Americana. Our country was built on railroads. It was built on that transportation history. Just a huge,
should be steam.
Yeah, something. But I don't know where you put that H in.
It's a silent H in front of the M.
There you go.
Steam with the silent H.
Perfect. But I've always talked about that. I talked to some of these these even model railroad clubs, and hey, you have an opportunity here. If you're building an era and you're doing it pretty close to prototype, you've captured history here. And it's an opportunity to tell people, this is essentially what it was. This is how product was moved, especially back then. There wasn't, before the major interstates, there was transcontinental railroads. That was how product was being moved back and forth. And that's how milk from Vermont got to New York City. That's how all these things happened. And there's such a huge history lesson in it as well. But such a great platform to teach kids off of the model railroading hobby.
It really is. I often have other museum people building museums, working on them, restructuring, whatever, trying to create a new layout or a layout they have, and they want some advice, which we always freely give. I will always tell you what I've screwed up.
I would want your entire playbook. I would go and say, right? Michelle, where's the playbook? I
usually tell them, I'm like, can you come and visit for a day? Can you spend a day with me here in Greely, and we'll talk through things and we'll talk about. But usually they're building a historic layout to tell a historic story. Really, the ultimate end of the day, they're building a layout to tell a historic story. And so the most important thing, is how do you interface the public into your story? Right. And so our layout is different. Our layout has a historic story, but it's very freelance, and the public in Colorado doesn't care about Oregon. Mm-hmm. What we have, we're a museum for the modeler. We're a museum about modeling. So we're a little different. And so I always tell them, make sure you understand what you're building and why you're building it.
Yes.
But most of them, 99% of what people are building are a historic layout to tell a wonderful historic piece. So
and such a nice, and it really is. It's a great tie-in and relatable, and that's key, right? That word relatable to whoever it's going to be, to the kids to be able to relate to it, to adults to be able to relate to it, history wise, or they're seeing those
like San Diego, their Tehachapi layout is fabulous, and it tells a great story.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. And I have seen so many smaller museums around the country that have their small layouts, but they're amazing because they teach me their history. So
that is amazing. So very cool things going on at the Colorado Model Railroad Museum. What are some of the, you've got all these events, and we could go on about events. What are some of the other projects that you're working on through the museum?
Right now we're in the middle of so many projects, I can't even tell you.
We have to have another hour. Huh,
but what we're dealing with is growth. Every year since, that third year, we've kind of grown almost exponentially. We grow a staff member, we grow, in huge ways every year. And now we're to the point of, we're out of space. We can't hire anyone because there's no desk. Yep. There's literally zero space to put a desk in the museum. And in fact, Madison shares a desk with Andy right now. Yep. so
you're hot racking desks and sharing
Yes,
offices.
we are.
Yeah.
And there's no space. There's no space. And we aren't teaching modeling, and we should be, but we don't have anywhere to do it. And so this wonderful couple who donated, honestly, the Christmas Village layouts to us said, they gave me a Christmas present. They said, Michelle, we have a Christmas present for you. We're going to pay for the gift of planning, and we will fund whatever you need to get to a drawing and a final dollar of what an expansion would look like for this place. Wow. Which is expensive, and we've never had the money to get to that point, right? Right. So we're in the middle of focus groups and working groups. So focus groups are when I get people together to talk about, if you were to visit the National Model Railroad Museum, what would be inside it for you?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so we've been gleaning all these thoughts from people. And if you're listening to this and you have a great thought about what you'd like to see in it, email me, because I'd like to know your thoughts. Sure. And then I have working groups who design, how big of a classroom do we really need? What really needs to be in that classroom? And we learned a really valuable lesson. You can't just build a classroom in a model railroad museum. You also have to build a model railroad room, because we have specialized tools. So Madison needs to be able to teach preschool class in the classroom, and then the next group that comes in needs soldering irons, right?
Yeah, those two don't mix, preschoolers and soldering irons.
And power tools. And so we're realizing we need a big room next to a classroom with roll-up walls or something. Mm-hmm. So it's been an interesting journey thinking through, if you could build the ultimate space to model in, and have people try modeling, what does that look like? And so it's been, and at the cusp of all of this, those two power poles have to come down. Just saying. Nothing happens without getting rid of those.
Yep, it's all back to the power pole.
It's all back to those power poles. But as soon as we get rid of those suckers, and we can have all this land. I've always been a visionary. I don't know if that's the right word. A dreamer. Even
They're
back
all the right words. Yeah.
Even back when the first year on the job, I said, Dave, we don't have a classroom. We got to grow. We need that warehouse. And he said, we're never going to get that warehouse. And a few years later, a man walked in the door and said, what do you need? And I said, I need that warehouse. And at the same time, the newspaper called and said, hey, we don't use it anymore. We'd like to sell you the warehouse. And so the donor wrote a check and bought us the warehouse.
Wow.
At lunch. Yeah.
Nice.
So, so it's pretty amazing. But back then I looked at those railroad tracks that are not used and I said, we need that land too. Mm-hmm. So we went into negotiations years ago and it took 4 years to get a lease on the land that the Great Western has. But we do have a lease in perpetuity that we can pave and park and drive over their land. Nice. And so now I have 3 city blocks of land in length to work with.
Nice.
And I did that years ago because I knew we needed to grow. And so it's taken 13 years to get to the point of actually, oh my gosh, what would it look like to really do it? But at least now the land's all there and there's still 2 power poles in the way. But other than that, we're doing good. And so we had looked at doing this prior to COVID and kind of we had a drawing done, just a dream drawing, and it's pretty amazing. And then COVID hit. And after COVID, we're like, well, what can we do now? Well, we own a lot of dirt. We owned a whole lot of dirt. And so we called it Outdoor Spaces and we decided to fence it in, take the power poles down and build a garden railroad. Wow. And so the garden railroad is supposed to go in June, but those power poles didn't come down over the winter. In fact, we've paid to have them come down and we're still waiting because you're waiting on a utility company who won't show up and do the work. Yeah. We raised the money.
They know it's kind of captive. They know you're not going to go out there on your own and take them down.
I know. So. And you'd think they'd have some sort of nonprofit rate. They don't care. It was $18,000 to have that pole taken down. So we paid it and they haven't showed up to do the work. So our garden railroad's going to be put off another year. But our front patio got an update and we just got new trees and bushes and bronze statues go in that were also donated by a man who I've known for a long time as a historian in Denver. And he called me and said, Michelle, I'm 91. And I went, what? There's no way you're 91, Al. Yeah. He says, I think you should have some bronze statues so they're on order and they'll be shipped in. And I'm like, okay.
That's amazing.
That's how things go at the museum.
Yeah, well, unbelievable generosity from these folks that want to be a part of it and see it grow. Yeah.
And I think everybody's like, oh my God, Michelle, your job must be so hard. You have to ask people for money. And I said, I never ask people for money. I invite them to find some joy in what we do.
Yeah.
And that's the key. I'm having fun and I'm inviting you to come along with us. Because if you aren't having fun and enjoying it, you don't need to put your money in it. Well,
I'll tell you what, I've learned in my life through working through many different jobs and volunteer opportunities and part-time jobs and all the other organizations that I've been a part of, that joy and enthusiasm starts from the top down, and you've definitely nailed it. And, when it's like, that saying, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life kind of mentality. And it seems
I just have a lifestyle.
You have it. Yeah.
Everybody's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I have a lifestyle. I chase trains. I work at a model railroad museum and I model at night. So it's just a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's for sure. You definitely have it going. And, that's been a lot of, And
it's been surprising that I've liked it, that I actually truly do enjoy it. I enjoyed rail fanning first for sure, but I actually have been enjoying the modeling. I'm surprised that I am, but I am. So
that's awesome. Well, as you continue to progress and then of course, you see the results of all your hard work with the museum and with your team that's turned it into a destination. Which is
we have such cool. Great people at the museum, just like Madison. Deb's amazing, Amy's amazing. Every time I have a need, the most amazing people walk in the door, and we could not do it without them. I might be the cheerleader at the top, but without the people that are there, nothing could happen. They keep the place going when I'm gone. Right. And they're wonderful.
That's amazing. Yeah. It always takes a great team to make great things happen. And
it does. And our volunteers we got 100 grandpas and they're amazing. They're not old. There's some young guys. In fact, we had we just did our summer newsletter, and I almost forgot to send this picture. We have 2 high school kids get their 1,000-hour awards in May.
Awesome.
And neither one have graduated high school yet.
Wow.
That's a lot of volunteer hours to put in before you've even graduated high school.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you have a great place and a great enthusiastic people to work along with, it makes it easy to volunteer. That's for sure. When you have a reason to keep coming back.
We're definitely a family, because one of those boys, Michael, went to be a brakeman on the Durango in Silverton, and a lot of us have gone to see him.
That's awesome.
Right.
That's awesome.
And we've been supporting him from afar. So
awesome. Awesome. Well, Michelle, got to wrap it up here on this. Okay. We'll definitely have you back, because there's so much going on with the Colorado Model Railroad Museum and all the activities that we didn't even get to, like you said, we would have to do an entire hour just on the activities and events that you've got going on. But thank you for coming on, sharing your story, sharing the story of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm having fun. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.